Our next story is from Sri Lanka, and this is a very important week for them. The first anniversary of the anti-Rajapaksa protest. You may remember these pictures. The presidential palace in Colombo was overrun. Protesters were lounging inside. Then President Gotabaya Rajapaksa was on the run. That was a tricky moment for Sri Lanka. It was a 50-50 situation. Anything could have happened. The country could have descended into absolute anarchy, or it could have rebuilt with patience. Thankfully, the latter happened. Sri Lanka is on the road to recovery. It's not like the economy is booming, but at least there is political and social stability, and India has played a key role in that. New Delhi gave Sri Lanka assistance worth $4 billion. It also batted for Colombo at the International Monetary Fund, the IMF. So it's now time for the next step, to rebuild the economy. India's Foreign Secretary Vinay Quatra landed in Colombo on Monday. His mission is twofold. One, to review the progress of Indian projects. And two, chart out President Ranil Wickremesinghe's trip to India. He is expected to arrive later this month on the 21st of July. It's his first trip to India after taking office last year. Quite the delay, in fact. He was invited by Foreign Minister Jaishankar in January, but for 6 months the trip did not happen. Now, Wickremesinghe is no stranger in New Delhi. He's been Prime Minister 5 times. He's engaged with multiple Indian governments in the past, but this time the stakes are much higher. So what does the Sri Lankan president hope to achieve? Well, two things. One is getting money from India, and two, addressing India's concerns about China. Let's deal with the first one first. Sri Lanka needs financial support, the restructuring of loans. It is hoping for Indian investment, especially in energy, power and ports, and these are all crucial sectors. Both sides are keen on Trincomalee. It's a city in northeastern Sri Lanka. It is already home to a harbour. India and Sri Lanka are looking to convert it into a major port. On Sunday, an Indian diplomat in Colombo promised to keep supporting Sri Lanka. He said India will play a constructive role. So that's one agenda item. Wickremesinghe's second job is on China, to convince New Delhi of its position. Colombo says it is not interested in camp politics. It wants to be neutral between India and China. But will India accept that? The Chinese have not abandoned their plans in Sri Lanka. They're back in the mix. Companies like China Harbour Corp and Sinopec are eyeing investments. Sinopec has already been shortlisted for a project, a $4 billion refinery near Hambantota. The fact is, Colombo needs China's help. Around 20% of their debt is owed to Beijing. So without them, there is no restructuring or rebuilding, and China knows that too. All of Sri Lanka's creditors have created a joint forum, sort of like a single window to renegotiate the debt. But guess who's staying away? The Chinese. They have refused to join the other creditors. They want to work out their own deal. It's fishy even by China's standards. So Wickremesinghe needs to convince New Delhi about the China factor. And all of this discussion is based on a very important assumption, the assumption that Sri Lanka will recover. Other countries can only help. In the end, Sri Lanka will have to do the heavy lifting. And there's a problem. A lot of Sri Lankans are leaving the country. Around 150,000 Sri Lankans have left since January. The government says 300,000 people will have left by the end of this year, 2023. It's an exodus. Many of these people are going to Gulf countries, and the result is this. There is a labour shortage in Sri Lanka. Doctors, nurses, engineers, construction workers, all of them are in short supply. And without them, recovery will be tough. We talked about ports and refinery projects. You need people to build and operate them. So this brain drain and this loss of labour could derail the rebuilding process. What can Colombo do? They've already announced a plan to restructure domestic debt. The next step is to negotiate with foreign lenders. If all goes well, the IMF will help them. A $3 billion bailout has been struck. After a review in September, that money could be released. It's all about speed and time now. Wickremesinghe says it will be a long and hard road to recovery. But will his people stay around for the bitter pill? As NATO leaders meet in Europe, a new security challenge is emerging in the Pacific. China is spreading its roots. It may end up with a military base in the Pacific. The Americans are throwing a fit, but the deal is done. A deal between China and the Solomon Islands. They say it's all about police cooperation, but it will have much wider implications. So let me tell you about it. The Prime Minister of the Solomons visited Beijing. His name is Manasseh Sogavare. If you watch the show, you know who he is, China's man in the Pacific, so indebted to Beijing financially and politically that he faces the wrath of his own people. Now, this Prime Minister went to meet President Xi Jinping and he heaped praises on China and its leader. Listen to this.
Mr. President, we watch all the bullying that is happening in the world today. And I admire where you stand amidst all those very trying times. And Mr. President, you are taking the lead, and the Solomon Islands and the small island Pacific countries admire the stance that you take. This speaks of the visionary leadership you continue to take on all the issues that is happening in the world today.
He's calling Xi Jinping a visionary. It says a lot about his own political myopia. The Chinese president reciprocated with this announcement.
I am very pleased to jointly announce with you, Mr. Prime Minister, that China and the Solomon Islands will establish a comprehensive strategic partnership featuring mutual respect and common development for a new era. I wish that the two sides will take the occasion of your visit to enhance strategic communication and deepen cooperation in various sectors.
So they have a total of 9 deals now, including the one about policing. They haven't shared the specifics. All we have is a joint statement with some vague proclamations. It says China and the Solomons are building a quote-unquote comprehensive strategic partnership. They've specified 2 areas, law enforcement and security matters. And I have a quote. This is what it says. The Chinese side will continue to provide support and help to Solomon Islands as needed in strengthening Solomon Islands' police law enforcement capacity. Well, this can mean anything, really. Training the police on the Solomon Islands, or working with them on a real-time basis, or perhaps even deploying Chinese security in the Solomons. You know what that means? A Chinese military post in the Pacific. The US is sounding an alarm. It is demanding answers. The US National Security Council issued a statement. It wants the full text of the agreement. And they have good reason to be suspicious because the new deal builds on an earlier pact, a pact that was signed last year. Again, the details are scarce, but some pages of the draft had leaked. They mentioned the PLA and the possibility of a Chinese military base where Chinese soldiers could potentially be deployed in the Pacific. When these details were leaked, the Solomon Islands denied them. But the rebuttal only added to the mistrust, and China's actions did not help. You see, Beijing is making deep inroads in the islands. They already provide police training. They've donated replica guns, at least 22 police vehicles, 30 motorcycles, 8 drones, and riot control equipment like water cannons. This is what China has given the Solomons in the last year. In response, Prime Minister Sogavare had called for deeper security ties with China. In fact, I have his statement from last year. This is what he said. Going forward, I would like to see a more permanent arrangement in place. I think it is prudent that Solomon Islands and the People's Republic of China start discussion on how we can elevate the current joint training arrangement to a more permanent arrangement with clearly defined expected outcomes which aim at ensuring that police have capability in the long term. Those were Sogavare's thoughts last year. And he made his intentions quite clear. He wanted a permanent arrangement with the Chinese. Now he has it. Where does that leave the West, the US and its allies? Where does it leave them? Outmaneuvered by China, and not for the first time. When the security pact was signed, it caught the West by surprise. They were not paying attention to the Pacific. The Americans scrambled. Suddenly, after 3 decades, they reopened their embassy in the Solomons. They reached out to regional players with some help from Australia. They even organized a summit, a US-Pacific summit. But these were all late moves. Now China has a deal that will most likely lead to a military base. In the battle for the Pacific, this round has gone to Beijing. Now to Africa, a continent with a lot of potential, unlimited resources, an untapped market, and a young demographic. Africa has all of it. The world was late to realize this, but now they've woken up to the fact. China was the first. It invested billions and lured African nations into a debt trap. Then there were the others, the United States, Europe, even India, all looking to enhance their ties with Africa. But now the continent has an unlikely suitor, the Islamic Republic of Iran. Their president is making a beeline for Africa. His name is Ebrahim Raisi, and he will embark on a rare tour. He will visit Kenya, Uganda, and Zimbabwe. It's the first trip by an Iranian president to Africa in 11 years, so clearly it's being talked about. But what is Raisi doing there? Why does he want to go to Africa? Why is Iran suddenly courting Africa? You see, the Iran of today is an isolated country, both politically and economically. There are sanctions imposed by America, a battered economy, the protests last year, and its waning influence in West Asia. So the regime has come up with a new strategy: diplomacy. Tehran is engaging with friends. It is also engaging with its enemies. Basically, it's doing everything it can to forge alliances. Case in point, Africa. In March this year, President Raisi hosted a meeting with African representatives. He pitched Iran as a different kind of partner, different from the typical colonial West. And now he's touring the continent. The obvious focus is trade. Iran and Africa have a robust bilateral trade. It was just over $1.2 billion last year. This is a 107% rise from 2021, but it's not enough, far from it. Tehran's footprint in Africa pales in comparison to its neighbors, the likes of Saudi Arabia and Turkey. Look at the numbers. In 2021, Turkey's Africa trade, the bilateral trade, was over $34 billion. So clearly, Iran has a long way to go. Same for diplomatic presence. Currently, Tehran has less than 20 embassies in Africa. Compare that to Turkey. They have embassies in 44 African nations. So there's a lot of catching up to do. And it won't be easy. Not all African nations trust Tehran. Morocco, for instance, cut diplomatic ties in 2018. Relations with Egypt have been rocky. And these are two economic powerhouses in Africa. And Tehran knows that. So it's waving the white flag. In June, Iran's foreign minister issued a statement. He said they are willing to restore ties with both Morocco and Egypt. It's not clear when that will happen, but Iran sounds desperate. Look at their recent moves. On the 8th of July, Raisi met the Algerian foreign minister. He talked about boosting ties. Last week, Iran became a member of the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, a group that includes Russia, India, and China. In June, Raisi set out on a tour of Latin America. He visited Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Cuba. And now he's going to Africa, pushing for stronger ties. That's a lot of engagements and travel in 2 months. Iran calls it a new policy of openness, but the world sees it for what it is: economic and political compulsions. Iran goes to polls next year. It will be a big test for Raisi's regime. He came to power with a promise to fix the economy, and look at what he's achieved: rampant inflation and a falling rial. That's the Iranian currency. It's falling. So they need an economic boost, and for that, they need the world to help them, hence the outreach. Deals with Latin America and Africa will help. If it works out, it's like hitting two birds with a stone. Iran will save its economy and reclaim some space in global politics. And now let's move from foreign lands to the deep blue sea. A new calamity is gearing up to affect our oceans. We're talking about deep sea mining. There's an urgent meeting taking place in the Caribbean island nation of Jamaica. It's to decide the fate of mining on our ocean floors. The clock is ticking. Countries want to start scouring the ocean floor for rare metals. But they need permission, a set of rules and regulations. You see, no nation controls the oceans. So its regulation is up to the UN. But as the UN scrambles to figure out what to do, more and more countries are insisting on a moratorium on deep sea mining. Our next report tells you why.
The world is over 70% ocean. You learn about this at a young age. But how much do we really know about our oceans? We know a bit about the ocean surface, but we've barely scratched the surface when it comes to the ocean floor. There are a few things we know for sure, though. One is that the deep sea is a fragile ecosystem, and two, it is full of minerals. We'll talk about the minerals and their potential in a bit. Before that, we would like to ask, would you disturb a fragile ecosystem, one you barely know anything about, for economic benefits? You don't know what will happen if the ecosystem gets damaged. You don't know how to fix anything that goes wrong. So, would you still go ahead with disturbing things in such a delicate situation? It seems so, because that's what some countries and companies want to do with the deep sea mining. As we said, the ocean floor is known to have minerals, metals like cobalt, nickel, and manganese. These are metals that go into making electric vehicle batteries and other green technologies. And they're reportedly just lying about the seafloor, in the form of potato-shaped rocks apparently. Sounds like an easy solution to all our green energy problems, doesn't it? That's what the advocates of deep ocean mining are saying. They want permission to start picking up these rocks. And they're pitching this as a solution for climate change. Yes, we aren't making this up. Those wanting to mine the deep sea say it's less harmful than mining on land. There's no proof of this, of course, because, like we mentioned, we don't know much about the deep sea. And, very conveniently, no one has made any promises to stop mining on land. It basically sounds like people trying to exploit yet another area of our planet. The consequences be damned. But despite the obvious risks, we're approaching a pivotal moment. The next few days could determine the future of deep sea mining. It's because of a chain of events set off by a mining company and a Pacific island. The Canadian conglomerate, the Metals Company, and the tiny island nation of Nauru. It's an island nation with no capital city, one major road, and about 12,000 people. In 2021, Nauru put in a request to mine the deep sea in partnership with the Metals Company. It filed the request with the International Seabed Authority, which has authority in these matters. It's a UN body based out of Jamaica. Now, since this was the first time a country actively wanted to mine the ocean floor, the ISA didn't have a plan. But it was on a timer to come up with new regulations, a 2-year timer that expired on Sunday. But the ISA still doesn't know what to do. Over the last few days and months, more and more countries and companies have come out against the proposal.
I want to be very clear here. France will honor its commitments and remain true to what I have already said, which is why France supports a ban on all deep-sea mining. I take this position and I will bring it to the international fora.
France, Germany, Costa Rica, and a host of others are against deep-sea mining, as are businesses including BMW, Google, and Samsung. They want the ISA to impose a moratorium or ban on mining, at least for a few years while we wait for more scientific research. Meanwhile, there are countries like the UK, China, Russia, and India that have been exploring the seas, checking to see if it makes sense to begin deep-sea mining. Now, all eyes are on the International Seabed Authority. In the next few weeks, we'll know whether a new gold rush is on the cards, and if our oceans, like our land, will be at the mercy of human greed.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. We're starting with Israel. The country's parliament has given its initial nod to Prime Minister Netanyahu's judicial overhaul plan, and this has triggered protests in several parts of the country. Meanwhile, a volcano has erupted in southwest Iceland. This happened after an intense earthquake activity in the area, and heavy rain has caused floods in the US state of Vermont. Finally, taking you back in history, on this day in the year 2006, a string of powerful explosions happened in India's financial capital, Mumbai. The blasts took place in local trains during evening rush hour. Nearly 200 people were killed and about 900 were injured. 9 years later, 5 convicts were given the death sentence. We're leaving you with that. Thanks for watching.